Chantel Allen had everything under control. So under control. Her house was clean, her kids were doing fine, she was experimenting with a couple of new career options. And then she started having stress seizures.
I would never have told you I was stressed out or that I was anxious. I walked around thinking my life is okay, but I didn't realize how amazing my life could be. And it doesn't mean that now I don't have hard days or that my kids don't frustrate me or that my house doesn't overwhelm me at times, but I have now the ability to see that, and it's not a prolonged state. It's usually just a couple hours, maybe even a couple days. So I get to have what I call the full ride now. I have the highs and the lows, and it really is like this roller coaster thrill that I'm on all of the time. And I just have just a clearer picture of what I want my life to look like than I ever did before.
This is the How She Moms podcast with Whitney Archibald. I'm a mother of 5 on a mission to help moms connect with your kids, manage your homes, and create your own unique version of motherhood. I curate ideas from different moms so you can pick and choose what works for you and your family. Today, I'm delighted to share some of the highlights from a conversation I had with Chantel Allen, a mom of 4 and a life coach. Chantel also hosts a podcast of her own called Living and Loving Your Life, and she is certainly an expert on that. In this episode, she'll talk about some of the different stages of motherhood and her career path from preschool teacher to life coach. We also talk about how she has learned to live with anxiety and to help her children through some of the same challenges. I started our interview by asking her about when she knew she wanted to be a mom.
I am the oldest of 7 kids. So I've always had the desire for a big family. And my husband is actually the youngest of 7 kids. So between the both of us, we have the spread. So I always thought, like, literally growing up, I had, how we all have those dream plans of what our life is going to look like and who we're going to marry. My plan was always to have about 6 kids. And then I started having kids and it changed a little bit. So I have 4 kids now, and I had them in 4 years. So I had 4 in 4 years, which
Oh boy.
was very, very close together, but I wouldn't have had it any other way. Like, it was hard at the time. And the first 2 were kind of unexpected, that close together, but I was like, let's just do this. Let's have some fun, get it done. And I love it because I kind of go through the stages of not only motherhood, but my kids' stages all at the same time, which is
Yeah, that's
really, really kind of fun. So that's kind of where I'm at. And it's interesting because I love the question that you asked me of like the stages of motherhood. And it
yeah.
kind of took me reflecting of like, there really is stages of motherhood that we all go through that I don't think we've really even pinpointed very, very
Yeah.
well. My stage is I have a tween. I have a 14-year-old and then a son who's about to be a 14-year-old. So I'm kind of straddling 2 stages where all of my kids are in school, but they're kind of trying to figure out who they are. And I'm trying to figure out this new stage of mothering teenagers and their emotions. And so it's been fun, but I'm constantly learning. And that's, I think, what you do in motherhood, right? Is
Yeah.
constantly learn. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Okay. And when did you have your first baby? How old were you?
I was 21.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I
And
was done by 25. So it was kind of fun.
that's amazing. I was
Yeah.
just starting at 26. So
Okay. Like, everybody asked me that question, like, when should you start having kids? And we didn't start for 2 years and then had 4 really, really quickly. But I'm like, everybody's journey is perfect for them. I don't think
yeah,
there's a right or wrong way.
absolutely.
So I had fun reflecting on this because I was like, what was it like? And I think being the oldest, I had a lot of, I thought I knew what what it was gonna be like and had experience. And then you have this child that's put into your car and you go home with it. And it's like this rude awakening of, did you really just put a kid in my car? I don't know what I'm doing. And so I think it was this whole shift in reality of, I knew the book stuff, but now I have to apply it. And the child didn't want to act like the book stuff was telling me to do. So it was this kind of rude awakening, very, very exhausting. But like I said, I had 4 in 4 years. So I really had to kind of learn very, very quickly how to kind of jump into that whole pregnancy, infancy, lack of sleep stage. And I think I was just grappling at whatever I could possibly come up with at that time, which I think a lot of us do. We don't know what we're expecting. I think we can pretend all day long, but we have no idea what we're expecting. So
Yeah.
yeah, so
Or
it's
yeah,
crazy.
or what we're doing once it
Mhm.
comes. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So that was hard, but it was fun.
Yeah. So how did you manage with the lack of sleep? I can't even fathom, like, between breastfeeding and being pregnant. You probably couldn't even breastfeed for a lot of it because you were pregnant.
No, no. I found out I was pregnant with my second when my first was 6 months old.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it was a shock. It was very, very crazy. And I think my coping mechanism, I'm a busybody and I was a hustler. And so I was one of those that I just did the best that I could. Like, I defined my good job based off of what my house looked like, so I was living in the lack of sleep all of the time, and my coping mechanism was cleaning. It was doing, it was reading. It was just those little things that I just thought it was improving me every single day. I don't know if that's the right answer that I should have been doing, but that's what I did. So, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So there's that stage, that stage being a new mom, figuring it all out, survival mode, all of that. When did you feel a shift in your motherhood?
So I felt the biggest shift. So like I told you, I taught preschool for 9 years, and that was through all of my kids being at that age, which was so fun. So I got to be a stay-at-home mom, but also be their preschool teacher. But when my youngest turned 5 and was going to kindergarten, I had also had some medical issues, which kind of shifted me over to coaching. I quit preschool. So I felt this identity crisis of sending all of my kids off to school. I was no longer a mom or a preschool teacher between these certain hours of the day. And I did not know what to do. Like, it was truly, we hear it all the time of this motherhood crisis or identity crisis. I really felt it at that time because I didn't know what I was supposed to do. So I think that was the biggest stage jump for me that I fully recognized and had to really do a lot of learning and trying to figure out who I was now that I wasn't a mom or a preschool teacher during those times, which was really, really good, but it was so difficult at the same time.
Yeah. So did you try a few things before you landed on this coaching thing, or how did you arrive where you arrived?
Yeah, so I did because I am a hustler. I have to be busy. So I couldn't just sit at home and do nothing. That was my thought process is I had to do something. And so I went back to school and I was going to become a teacher full time. And I got into my last semester. I was interning and I just did not like it. I love
Wow.
teaching, but I did not like being there, having somebody over me, telling me the expectations. I had a lot of problems with it. So then I also went into trading. I went to online trading. Big, huge jump
Yeah.
into there. And it was all brought on by my husband. And it was some of the hardest mental stuff that I've ever done. That didn't fit, but I learned a lot. And then I actually started teaching Chinese to English online, did that for a long time. So if you notice, there was like a trend of learning, teaching. And so I was kind of trying to feel my way through. And it was, so I had stress seizures about it was almost 5 years ago now.
Oh, wow.
And it was all during this time. And my son started having major, major anxiety as well when he was in third grade. And so both of us kind of navigating this kind of shifted me on this quest of I've got to figure something out because I'm struggling. Now my son is struggling. There's got to be an answer that's out there. And so I found Jody Moore. I don't know if any of your listeners know her, but she was my mentor. I found her podcast and I started learning about anxiety, where our emotions come from, and it just started clicking. I was like, oh, this totally makes sense. And I gave my son, who was 7 at the time, the podcast. This was a podcast for moms, and it was clicking for him. It was that simple of information. And so I knew at that moment, I'm like, this is what I need to do because there's other moms who are anxious, exhausted, overwhelmed, and they don't understand why. They're grappling at hustling, doing more, which is not solving the problem. And then it's also transferring down to our kids. Our kids are watching us as moms, and they're in society. It's becoming harder and harder. So I was like, okay, this is what I need to do. I need to coach my kids. I need to coach moms, and that's kind of my journey that's gotten me to where I'm at now.
So
Yep.
once you arrived and figured out what you're doing, how would you describe your current stage?
So different than I've ever experienced. I thought my life was fine. Like when I had my stress seizures, I would never have told you I was stressed out or that I was anxious. I walked around thinking my life is okay, but I didn't realize how amazing my life could be. And it doesn't mean that now I don't have hard days, or that my kids don't frustrate me, or that my house doesn't overwhelm me at times. But I have now the ability to see that, and it's not a prolonged state. It's usually just a couple hours, or maybe even a couple days. So I get to have what I call the full ride now. I have the highs and the lows, and it really is like this roller coaster thrill that I'm on all of the time. And I just have just a clearer picture of what I want my life to look like than I ever did before. So it's just, I don't know, it's just more certainty, I guess. And I love it.
Awesome.
About it.
Cool. Okay. So this seems like a good time to kind of skip ahead and talk about how you've applied all this stuff that you've learned in coaching to parenting. Since becoming a coach, how has that changed the way you've parented?
My job description overall has completely changed. I think before I wasn't aware that I even had a description. I was telling you before, like when I was younger, I thought I had a hustle. I thought I had to do things. And I think that comes from the way we were brought up. And I think that's society tells us you have to have a clean house and you have dinner on the table, even though it's never written anywhere. It's just kind of what we've programmed into our brains. And I lived that way. I believed that my kids should be happy, they should be well behaved, and my house should be clean. Then I know I'm doing a good job as a mom. And as I've done coaching, I've understood a little bit more that no, that's out of my control, whether my kids behave or not, whether my kids are happy or not. That's completely out of my control. What's in my control is what I can teach them. Again, I'm saying teach, not that they learn it. And so
Right.
it's taking back that responsibility of like, okay, what is in my control 100% as a mom? And so I have like 2 or 3 things, it depends on where I'm at, but that I have decided is now in my job description. And which is I love my kids fearlessly. Doesn't mean that they will ever feel that fearless love that I feel, but it's just I'm super intentional with how I fiercely love them. I will make sure that they are protected, and then I will teach them. When they're younger, it's so easy to fiercely love them and snuggle on them. So I think it changes between stages, but everything is still within my control of what I'm doing. So when it comes to coaching, it's so beautiful because now I understand I don't have to tell my kids they can't feel a certain way. I don't need them to be happy all of the time for me to feel like I'm doing a good job in my life and in my role as a mother. And so now if I can feel that way, then I can actually pass that down to my kids. I can teach them, oh, it's totally okay that you're feeling sad. Oh, it's totally okay that you're feeling frustrated. I feel frustrated sometimes. And it's just having them work through that and not feeling this pressure to be happy all of the time or taking on everybody else's emotions all of the time. It's like this passing down effect of if you can own who you are and feel good about that, then your kids will learn that from just watching you.
Awesome. Okay. Um, you've mentioned a couple times that one of your sons was going through some hard times. How did this perspective help some of those difficulties?
Yeah. And he's still anxious.
Okay.
He's still very, very anxious. And I think that's one of the biggest things with coaching is people are like, it's just going to fix everything. And it doesn't. I still walk around with anxiety every single day, and so does my son. It's just now we have tools to kind of navigate through that. And so this is something I will tell your listeners, you can do this with your kids, which is so beautiful, but it's also so good for you, is to learn how to process your emotions and understand where your emotions come from. And that's what I'm constantly doing with my son. So just a couple days ago, he came home feeling super anxious. It was emotional. He was crying. And so I got to kind of work through this again with him. Now, mind you, he is older. So some of this stuff you would have to kind of dumb down a little bit, but it is asking him, okay, what are you feeling right now? And he'll tell me anxious. If your kid is younger, you might be saying, it looks like you're feeling a little bit stressed, or it looks like you're feeling a little bit sad, because they don't understand what their emotions are quite
Right.
yet. So you might have to tell them that. But then it's telling him like, hey, those are chemicals running through your body. That's all your emotions are. Sometimes having that scientific perspective takes us a step back and like, oh, that's all it is. It's just chemicals running through my body.
Yeah,
They
I'm
don't
not a bad
feel good.
person for feeling
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it doesn't feel the greatest, but you can totally, your body was created to feel these chemicals that are running through your body. And so I'll talk to him about them. Like, okay, it's anxiety. Let's lean in. And when I say lean in, it's really allowing this emotion, because we've been trained our entire lives to resist or avoid our emotions. mean, that's why social media is so big. We're avoiding our emotions. That's why eating chocolate is so great. We're avoiding some emotions. And it doesn't mean they're bad. It's just noticing what are you avoiding in that moment. And so it is taking a second to lean in. What does it feel like? And so I'll tell him, do you feel it in your head? No, I don't feel it in my head. Do you feel it in your neck? No, I don't feel it in my neck. And we do a body scan through his whole body, and I have him really go in to see what it feels like. And for most people that have a lot of anxiety, they feel it in their chest, and it's hard to breathe, and it's their stomach is turning in knots. And I'll go deeper with them. What color is it? What color, or is it hot? Is it cold? Is it open? Is it prickly? And you're trying to get very, very descriptive. It's almost like that movie Inside Out.
Uh-huh.
You want to try and get a character and to make it look like what you're feeling. Because again, it'll show your child that's all it is. It's harmless. It's just this thing that's running through your body. And when I do this with him, it's so crazy. He was so uptight and anxious. He calms down because he's now gone into his body to feel his emotions, to process it. And your emotions come from what you're thinking. So if you are not thinking about that thought, you're thinking about what it feels like, it allows you to take a step back and to feel some relief. Now, it doesn't mean that as soon as you're done processing it, it doesn't come right back up again. I say your emotions are just like the waves on a beach. It laps up and it comes super, super tight, and then it'll lap away. And then it might lap right back up again. And that's normal. It's not that you haven't done something the right way, but it's just allowing that to come over and over again because you're built for it. You're totally built to feel your anxiety. So I'll do that with him, and I'll have him say it over again. This is anxiety. This is anxiety. I can do some anxiety. This is just coming from thoughts in my head. And it'll help calm down and help you have a little bit of authority over it. And then after they've calmed down, then you can kind of say, hey, what were you thinking? What was going on for you that helped you, that had the anxiety come up for you? And again, it'll take him outside to show him, oh, it didn't come from this circumstance. It didn't come from this kid saying something. I had a thought about what that kid said that made me feel this way. And it just keeps bringing back the responsibility so that they can, because sometimes those anxious feelings feel very, very out of control. Like they have no control over the situation. And it's just showing them you are always in control of how you are feeling. And sometimes you don't want to feel good, but it's just knowing you can decide when you want to stop feeling that way, and how long you want it to be around, all of that.
That's so fascinating because I think often we're afraid to put a name to it as parents, especially.
Yes.
Because we're like, well, if we get them diagnosed with ADHD or depression or anxiety, then does that become a crutch or an excuse, more, not a crutch, but more of an excuse for certain behaviors? Or does that stigmatize them? And then, there are a lot of things that you can talk yourself out of. But the way you explain it, it sounds like it's actually really helpful to have a name.
And I had the same thoughts for a while, especially when my son was he was anxiety attacks in school, and his teachers were coddling him more. And I'm like, stop coddling him. Like I had to be kind of the authority and be like, he's okay. He's just experiencing anxiety. I think society has kind of put a stigma against some of these emotions.
Yeah.
And I think it's up to us as moms to kind of show them it's okay. We can have anxiety. It's what we think about it. So if you have your kid that's, diagnosed with ADHD, what do you think about it? Do you think it's a crutch, or do you think it is, no, I'm so empowered to know this information. Now I know what I can do to help him out.
We've done it to ourselves, attaching these stigmas.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%. And I think it is going to start with the mom. So if you're talking about like coaching your kids, do you tell them, oh my gosh, it's anxiety. We've got to fix this. Or it's like, it's totally okay. It's totally okay that you have anxiety. I have anxiety. Everybody has anxiety, because I am noticing this epidemic with teens that are feeling major depression and getting on meds really, really quickly. And I'm all for meds, but I think we've got to teach our kids it's totally okay to have negative emotion. That's a part of our experience. There's nothing wrong with you for feeling depressed at times, for feeling sad at times. And the more they can understand that and feel confident that, oh, I'm okay, I think we would have a completely different language around depression, ADHD. I mean, it would be a totally different experience.
Yeah. And we're probably getting there as it becomes more mainstream and acknowledged.
Yeah.
But it always takes a while to get there.
No, it does. My hope is that it becomes kind of like what we do with like contact lenses. We don't see people like, oh, I can't have contact lenses because I have bad eyes. It's like, no, you use what is there because it's a benefit to you. There's a tool that's out there. Now you have it. Why wouldn't you utilize it? And I feel the same way about depression with their meds and anxiety with their meds. And it's like, use it. Why wouldn't you use it? There's nothing wrong with you. We all have things that we are better for the tools that are out there for it, for us
Yeah.
to be able to use. So, well, and I think the other part of this too is we've had this whole idea that we have to get rid of some of these ailments. Like you have to get rid of depression or rid of anxiety. And my goal is to start telling people, no, you can thrive with those things. It's not a get rid of it, something is wrong. I'm like, no, that is a part of you. You're beautiful because of it. You are you because of it. Can you thrive and use it to your ability instead of being afraid to share it with everybody? I'm like, no, I have anxiety and I'm proud of it and I'm okay because I have it. Just owning that our kids' journey and our journey is perfect for ourselves. Like I think sometimes we look at our kids struggling and going through things and we think something has gone wrong and we need to fix it. And I think understanding, no, they are on their perfect journey. They have to go through what I call like the classes of their life to learn something to be able to go on to the next class. Helps us have a little bit more perspective and not feel the need to fix every little thing that our kids go through. Because I know I used to be like that. I used to be like, if my kid came home and their friend said something, I wanted to fix it and, see how I could tell them not to hurt and not to be suffered, or say this to your friend. And now I have that backwards approach of just saying, no, everything is totally okay. It's almost like this approach of you are the stewardess on a flight and your kid is the passenger. And if you can be that constant calm of, hey, there's turbulence, there's going to be some, dips, there's going to be some things where you feel a little bit out of control. If you can be that constant of like, no, it's perfect, it's okay, then your kid, even though they're going to be going through hard things, can look up at you and say, oh, it's all right, it's totally fine, we're going to get to our destination and it's going to be okay.
Okay. So I should go back to my list. We've kind of strayed a little bit. Going back to job description, I loved what you said and how precise you were about them. When were you able to uncouple that from household management?
So I think it was in the course of coaching. I prided myself on every inch of my house being so organized. I was one of those that my house was touched, every inch of it, within a couple months span, all of the time, always decluttering, always going through that. And I kind of wore that as a badge of honor, like, oh, I'm doing such a good job because my house is organized. But I think as I was going through this, I'm like, why am I making my house my identity? And it was because I had a lack of respect for who I was. I thought something was wrong with me. So if my house looked good, then people would think I'm doing a good job. And once I started to work on the relationship with myself, I realized my house is my family's home. I don't need it to be perfect, just like my family doesn't have to be perfect for me to love where I'm at, where they're at. And so it's been this unwiring. And I'll tell you what, I still struggle with this. There's times where I'll go out of my coaching office for a little bit and I'll go where my kids have been for a little bit, and it's like chaos. And I have to sit there for a second and I have to be, it's totally fine. It'll be cleaned up in 15 minutes. And so it's not to say that I've coached myself to never having those thoughts or I never have a knee-jerk reaction like that. I still do that. But it's so much different now than it was before, because I was constantly living in stress and overwhelm of who would knock at my door and they would open the door and they would see my house looking a certain way. And what would that mean? I was living in fear all of the time. Whereas now I'm like, it's okay. I am me and I am amazing exactly the way that I am. And I don't care what anybody else thinks about it. And I don't say that with any kind of pride or any, but I really do appreciate, I'm like, I love me and I love everybody else exactly the same.
That's awesome. How does that translate to what you expect from your children, like with their rooms, for example? Do you let them just do them or
Yeah.
do you manage it a little more?
Totally still manage it. And that's the thing is, I think people are like, okay, so if you let your kids do whatever, or it's
Right.
like, no, I just don't make my feelings attached to
Got it.
whether they do something or not, which is totally different. Because I used to be like, well, you've hurt my feelings because your room isn't clean, or you're making me so frustrated, whatever. I used to do that all of the time. And now I just changed my language to, hey, I'm so bummed that you decided not to do this. I love you so much. Now I'm going to have to give you this consequence. So I still have expectations. They still do
Right.
chores every single day. It's just I get to own who I am in that moment instead of it being the other way around where I just felt always out of control. Because here's the thing, Our kids are going to be kids. Our kids are going to lie. They're going to not want to do their chores. They're not going to want to, like, that's just how they are. And for us to expect differently, that's where we cause the unnecessary suffering. So now I just expect it. I'm like, they're not going to want to do their chores, but they're still going to do them. They may not want to do them, but they're going to still do them. And I'm okay. I'm confident. I'm happy. It's all right.
Thank you for listening to the How She Moms podcast. If you like it, tell a friend. The bigger the community, the more ideas. There are lots of ways you can add your ideas to the How She Moms community. We have a Facebook group where we share ideas about upcoming topics and help each other solve problems we're facing in motherhood. You can also follow How She Moms on Instagram for quick tips and ideas. And you can go to howshemoms.com where you'll find transcripts of episodes and lots of other great resources. Special thanks to my mom, Susan Singley, for recording my theme music. She played this song all the time when I was growing up, and to me, it's the soundtrack of motherhood.